Ever planted an avocado pit in a glass of water, watched it sprout, and then wondered why you never got a single piece of fruit? You are not alone. Growing avocados for an actual harvest is completely different from that little science experiment on your windowsill. In this video, I am going to walk you through the complete process of growing avocado trees that actually produce fruit. From choosing the right tree to harvesting those beautiful green gems. Plus, stick around to the end, where I am going to share my favorite trick for ripening avocados perfectly every single time. Let us get into it. Avocados are one of the most rewarding trees you can grow if you get a few key things right from the start. The good news is that once you understand how these trees actually work and what they need, growing them becomes surprisingly straightforward. So let us start by understanding what we are really working with here. One of the most important things to know when you are growing avocados is understanding how these trees actually produce fruit. Unlike a lot of fruit trees where you can just plant one and expect a harvest, avocados have a really interesting flowering system that you need to know about. Avocado trees produce flowers that are either type A or type B. Now here is where it gets fascinating. Each flower actually opens twice. Type A flowers open as female in the morning, close up, and then reopen the next afternoon as male. Type B flowers do the exact opposite. They open as female in the afternoon, close, and reopen as male the following morning. What this means for you as a grower is that having both a type A and a type B tree dramatically increases your chances of getting fruit. The timing of those flower openings allows for cross-pollination between the two types. Now, can you get fruit with just one tree? Sometimes, yes. In areas where temperatures fluctuate quite a bit between day and night, the flowering schedule can overlap enough for self-pollination to occur. But if you want reliable heavy harvests year after year, planting one of each type is really the way to go. Now let us talk about climate for a moment, because this is where a lot of people run into trouble. Avocados are native to Mexico and Central America. That means they evolved in a subtropical to tropical climate with warm temperatures, moderate humidity, and distinct wet and dry seasons. They are hardy in USDA zones 9 through 11, with some varieties tolerating brief dips down to about 25 degrees Fahrenheit once established. If you are in Zone 8 or colder, you can still grow avocados, but you will need to grow them in large containers and bring them indoors or into a greenhouse during winter. I have seen people do this successfully, but I will be honest with you, it takes commitment. Now that we understand how avocados grow, let us talk about choosing the right tree. This is probably the most important decision you are going to make in this whole process, because it affects everything that comes after. First, forget about planting that pit from your grocery store avocado. I know it is tempting because you already have it, but here is the reality. Seed-grown avocados can take anywhere from 7 to 15 years to produce fruit, and even then, the fruit quality is a complete gamble. It will not be the same as the avocado you ate. What you want is a grafted tree from a reputable nursery. Grafted trees are created by taking a cutting from a known producing variety and attaching it to a strong rootstock. This gives you the best of both worlds. You get a tree that will produce fruit identical to the parent variety, usually within 2 to 4 years. And you get a vigorous root system that helps the tree establish quickly. So which variety should you choose? Let me break down some of the most popular options. Hass is the one most people know. It is a type A avocado with that dark pebbly skin that turns almost black when ripe. The flavor is rich and nutty, and it is incredibly productive once it gets going. Hass does well in zones 9 through 11 and handles temperatures down to about 30 degrees once established. If you can only plant one tree and you are in a warmer climate, Hass is hard to beat. Fuerte is a type B variety, which makes it an excellent pollination partner for Hass. It has smooth green skin and a slightly milder flavor. Fuerte is actually a bit more cold tolerant than Hass, handling temperatures down to about 26 degrees. In my experience, Fuerte trees tend to be a little more vigorous growers in their early years. Bacon is another type B that deserves attention, especially if you are pushing the limits of avocado growing zones. It handles cold down to about 24 degrees, making it one of the hardiest options available. The fruit has a lighter, less oily flavor that some people prefer. Mexicola is the cold champion. This type A variety can handle temperatures down to about 18 degrees Fahrenheit, which is remarkable for an avocado. The trade-off is smaller fruit with thin edible skin, but if you are in Zone 8 and determined to grow avocados, Mexicola is your best bet. When you are shopping for trees, look for ones that are about 2 to 4 feet tall in at least a 5-gallon container. Check that the graft union, that knobby spot near the base of the trunk, looks healthy and well-healed. Avoid trees with yellowing leaves, root-bound conditions, or any signs of disease. I always recommend buying from a local nursery if possible, because those trees are already somewhat acclimated to your area. Now that you have your tree, let us get it in the ground. Choosing the right spot is critical, so take your time with this decision. Avocados need full sun, at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight per day. They also need protection from strong winds, which can damage branches and dry out the leaves. A south-facing location with a wall or fence on the north side works beautifully because you get maximum sun exposure plus wind protection and a little extra reflected heat. Here is something a lot of people do not realize. Avocados are extremely sensitive to poorly drained soil. More avocado trees die from root rot caused by wet feet than just about any other problem. So before you dig that hole, do a simple drainage test. Dig a hole about a foot deep, fill it with water, and let it drain completely. Then fill it again and time how long it takes to drain. If the water is gone within an hour or two, you are in good shape. If it takes more than 4 hours, you have got drainage problems that need to be addressed. In heavy clay soil, I recommend planting on a mound. Build up the soil about 12 to 18 inches above the surrounding grade and plant your tree at the top. This keeps the roots up and out of any standing water. When you dig your planting hole, make it about twice as wide as the root ball but no deeper. You want the top of the root ball to sit slightly above the surrounding soil level, maybe an inch or so. Avocados are really sensitive to being planted too deep, and if you bury that graft union or pile soil up against the trunk, you are asking for trouble. Gently remove the tree from its container, loosen any circling roots with your fingers, and set it in the hole. Backfill with the native soil you dug out. I know a lot of people want to amend the hole with compost and fancy stuff, but research actually shows that trees establish better when you use the native soil. The roots need to learn to grow in what is actually there, not in some pampered pocket of perfect mix. Once it is planted, water it in thoroughly to settle the soil and eliminate air pockets. Then apply a nice thick layer of mulch, about 3 to 4 inches deep, in a circle around the tree. Keep that mulch a few inches away from the trunk itself to prevent moisture from sitting against the bark. I like to use wood chips or shredded bark for this, and I extend the mulch out to about 3 feet from the trunk in the first year. By the way, if you are finding this helpful so far, make sure to subscribe so you do not miss future videos. Now let us keep going. After you have got your avocado tree in the ground, watering is going to be your most important job for the first couple of years. Get this right, and your tree will establish quickly and start producing sooner. Get it wrong, and you will be fighting problems constantly. Here is what I have learned over the years. Young avocado trees need consistent moisture, but they absolutely cannot sit in waterlogged soil. It is a balancing act, and the key is deep, infrequent watering rather than frequent, shallow watering. For a newly planted tree, I water deeply 2 to 3 times per week, during warm weather for the first few months. By deep watering, I mean letting a hose run slowly at the base of the tree for about 15 to 20 minutes so the water soaks down into the root zone rather than just wetting the surface. After those first few months, you can start backing off to once or twice a week, depending on your soil and climate. The best way to know when to water is to check the soil. Stick your finger down about 3 inches. If it feels dry at that depth, it is time to water. If it still feels moist, wait another day or two. As the tree matures over the next few years, you can gradually reduce watering frequency because those roots will be reaching deeper and accessing moisture that younger roots cannot reach. A mature avocado tree in the ground typically needs a good deep watering every week to 2 weeks, depending on conditions. Though during fruit development in summer you may need to water more frequently. Now let us talk about what happens above ground during this establishment period. Your young tree may drop some leaves after transplanting. This is normal. It is stressed from the move and adjusting to its new home. As long as new growth starts, emerging within a few weeks, you are on track. One thing I like to do with young avocado trees is provide a little afternoon shade during their first summer, especially if you are in a really hot climate. Even though they love sun, the tender new growth can get scorched by intense afternoon heat before the tree has built up its defenses. A simple shade cloth on the west side of the tree can make a big difference. You can remove it the following year once the tree is established. If you plant it in an area that gets any frost at all, you will want to protect your young tree during its first few winters. Avocado bark is thin and the wood is brittle, so frost damage can be devastating to a young tree. I wrap the trunk with tree wrap or burlap from the ground up to the first branches. On nights when hard frost is expected, I drape frost cloth over the entire canopy and sometimes add a string of old-fashioned incandescent Christmas lights underneath for a little extra warmth. Once your tree is 5 or 6 years old and has developed thicker bark, it will handle cold much better on its own. Once your avocado tree has been in the ground for about a year and is showing strong new growth, it is time to start thinking about fertilizing. Avocados are moderately heavy feeders, but they are also sensitive to salt buildup and can be burned by too much fertilizer applied at once. The key is feeding little and often rather than dumping a big dose once or twice a year. I fertilize my avocado trees 4 times per year, roughly every 3 months starting in early spring. For young trees in their first 3 years, I use about 1 pound of a balanced organic fertilizer per year of age, split into those 4 applications. So a 2-year-old tree gets about half a pound of fertilizer 4 times per year. As the tree matures, you can increase the amount, but honestly, avocados are not as hungry as citrus, so do not go overboard. What kind of fertilizer works best? Avocados need nitrogen for leaf growth, phosphorus for root development and flowering, and potassium for overall health and fruit quality. They also need zinc, which is a common deficiency in avocado trees. Look for a fertilizer formulated specifically for avocados or citrus, or use a balanced organic fertilizer and supplement with a zinc spray once or twice a year in spring and summer. I have had great results with a combination of composted chicken manure applied in early spring and a citrus and avocado granular fertilizer for the remaining applications. Spread the fertilizer evenly under the canopy drip line, which is that imaginary circle on the ground directly below the outer edge of the branches. That is where the feeder roots are concentrated. Water it in well after applying. Beyond fertilizing, the main ongoing maintenance your avocado tree needs is keeping that mulch layer replenished. As it breaks down over time, it feeds the soil and improves its structure. But you need to add more each year to maintain that 3 to 4 inch depth. I usually top up my mulch in late spring after I have done my first fertilizer application. Now let us talk about pruning, because this is where a lot of people either do too much or not enough. Avocado trees can get absolutely massive if left to their own devices. We are talking 40 to 60 feet tall for some varieties. Unless you have got a cherry picker in your garage, that is not practical for harvesting. The good news is that avocados respond really well to pruning and can be kept at a very manageable size, anywhere from 10 to 15 feet tall, while still producing abundantly. The best time to prune avocados is in late winter or early spring before the new growth flush begins. For young trees, the goal is to establish a strong, open framework. I like to keep about 3 to 5 main scaffold branches that are evenly spaced around the trunk. Remove any branches that are crossing, rubbing, or growing straight up through the center of the tree. You want good air circulation and light penetration throughout the canopy. For mature trees, annual pruning focuses on keeping the tree at your desired height and removing dead or damaged wood. Here is a pro tip I have learned. Avocados produce fruit on new wood, meaning the growth that happened in the current or previous season. So when you prune, you are actually encouraging the tree to produce more of that fruiting wood. Do not be afraid to cut back fairly hard if your tree is getting too tall. I take about a foot or two off the top of my trees each year to keep them accessible. One thing to avoid is pruning in fall or early winter. Pruning stimulates new growth, and if that tender new growth gets hit by frost, it can damage or even kill large sections of the tree. Late winter pruning gives the tree time to heal and push out new growth once the weather warms up. Let us talk about some common problems you might run into and how to solve them. Honestly, avocados are pretty trouble-free once established, but there are a few things to watch for. First, if you are seeing brown leaf tips and edges, this is almost always a salt buildup issue. Avocados are very sensitive to salts, both from irrigation water and from fertilizer. If you are on well water or in an area with hard water, salts accumulate in the soil over time, and the tree shows it in the leaves. The solution is deep leaching. Once a month during the growing season, water very heavily, so that water runs through the root zone and out the bottom, carrying those salts with it. You need to apply about 6 inches of water to effectively leach the salts. Also back off on fertilizer if you have been applying heavily. Second, yellowing leaves can indicate a few different things. If older leaves at the interior of the tree are yellowing and dropping, that is usually normal. The tree is just shedding older foliage it no longer needs. But if new leaves are coming out yellow or pale green, especially with dark green veins, you are looking at an iron or zinc deficiency. A foliar spray of chelated iron or zinc sulfate usually corrects this within a few weeks. I spray my trees once in early spring and again in midsummer as a preventative. Third, root rot is the big one. If your tree is wilting even though the soil is moist, if leaves are dropping rapidly, or if you notice a general decline in vigor, root rot caused by a fungus called Phytophthora may be the culprit. This is almost always caused by overwatering or poor drainage. Unfortunately, once root rot sets in, it is very difficult to reverse. Prevention is everything here. Make sure your drainage is excellent, do not overwater, and keep mulch away from the trunk. If you catch it early, you can try letting the soil dry out completely between waterings and applying a fungicide drench. But honestly, the survival rate is not great once symptoms are visible. Fourth, if your tree is flowering but not setting fruit, pollination is usually the issue. Remember what we talked about earlier with type A and type B flowers. If you only have one tree, try planting a pollination partner of the opposite type. You can also try hand pollinating by using a small paintbrush to transfer pollen between flowers in the morning and afternoon when different flower types are open. Fifth, sunburn on the trunk and branches is common in young trees or trees that have been heavily pruned, exposing bark that was previously shaded. You will see cracked, dried, or peeling bark on the sun-exposed side. Prevent this by painting exposed bark with a diluted white latex paint, about half paint and half water. It reflects the sun and protects that sensitive bark. The good news is that if you follow the steps we have covered, you should avoid most of these issues entirely. Now for the moment we have all been waiting for: harvesting your avocados. Here is something that surprises a lot of new growers. Avocados do not ripen on
your tree. You can leave them hanging there for months, and they will just keep slowly growing and developing oil content, but they will not soften until you pick them. This is actually great news, because it means the tree becomes your storage unit. You can pick avocados as you need them, rather than dealing with a huge harvest all at once. So how do you know when an avocado is ready to pick? The tricky part is that it varies by variety and even by individual tree. Generally speaking, avocados need about 12 to 18 months from flowering to reach maturity. For Hass, the skin darkens slightly and loses some of its shine when mature. For green-skinned varieties like Fuerte, look for a slight yellowing of the skin and the fruit feeling full and heavy. The most reliable test is to pick one and try to ripen it. If it ripens within a week or two without shriveling or turning rubbery, your fruit is mature. If it shrivels, stays hard, or gets stringy, give the rest of the fruit on the tree another few weeks and try again. When you harvest, use pruning shears or clippers to cut the stem about an inch above the fruit. Do not pull or twist the fruit off because you can damage both the fruit and the branch. Handle them gently because bruises will show up as dark spots in the flesh once ripened. Now for that bonus tip I promised at the beginning. Let me share my favorite trick for ripening avocados perfectly and keeping them at their peak. Most people just leave avocados on the counter and hope for the best. But here is a much better method. For fast ripening, place your avocados in a brown paper bag with a banana or an apple. Those fruits release ethylene gas, which speeds up the ripening process dramatically. Check daily, and your avocado should be ready in 2 to 4 days instead of the usual week or more. Here's the part most people do not know. Once an avocado reaches that perfect stage where it gives just slightly when you press it, put it straight in the refrigerator. This stops the ripening process cold and gives you a 3 to 5 day window where that avocado stays at peak perfection. No more coming home to find your avocados went from rock hard to brown mush while you were at work. Ripen at room temperature, then refrigerate to hold. I do this with all my homegrown avocados, and I never waste a single one. You can also freeze avocado for longer storage. Cut them in half, remove the pit, scoop out the flesh, mash it with a little lemon juice to prevent browning, and freeze in airtight containers. Frozen avocado works great for guacamole, smoothies, and dressings, though the texture is too soft for slicing. So that is everything you need to know about growing avocados for a huge harvest. If you found this helpful, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you do not miss future videos. And if you have any questions or want to share your own avocado growing tips, drop them in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and good luck in the garden.